Hi everybody, welcome to today's webinar on ArcGIS for Developers. My name is Philip Thompson. I am the Senior Solution Architect with Esri Ireland. So today's webinar is the fourth in a series of webinars which we've ran over the summer, which I've hoped has taken software developers on the equivalent of couch to 5K in location-based services. So a little bit of housekeeping before I start. So the previous webinars, I've linked recordings of the previous webinars. I've linked on this webinar. So if you want to catch up, you can view those recordings there. If you have any questions, by all means, post the questions during the webinar, and I will try and answer them during the course of the session today. There are a number of points in the session where I'll be waiting on a piece of analysis to finish. So if I don't have any questions, I'll be struggling at that point. So today's webinar is on the spatial analysis services that are available to you within ArcGIS for Developers. So the previous sessions focused on services and capabilities which for the most part would be common to any location-based services platform. What we're going to be focusing on today are services which are pretty much unique to Esri and ArcGIS. So Esri is an organization that has been in existence for 51 years. We've worked with customers solving complex spatial problems over that 51 years. And we have developed a series of services which are cognizant of the problems that our customers have needed to solve over that period of time. So what we hope that these services enable you to do is to give you greater understanding of spatial patterns, identify spatial patterns within your data, be able to summarize data, find locations, perform data enrichment activities, analyze your data for patterns, use proximity within your analysis, and manage your data sets. And what I hope you come away with today is an appreciation that there are shortcuts, there are simple ways of solving complex problems. You can at times offload the complexity of those problems to the ArcGIS spatial services and focus on the business problems that you have to have. So these are a series of services which allow you to do a number of things. So they are premium services, so they do consume credits. So I'll just look at an overview of some of these services. I'm sorry for the table. The formatting of this table gets a bit wonky as we go down. So there are services here that I use quite a bit. So summarize within and aggregate points I found to be really useful services in terms of being able to look at big data sets, be able to anonymize that data, summarize data into a format that can be more easily understood by an audience. Other services that I'd look at quite commonly, so creating a view shed. So that might sound like a very technical thing, but so I did a piece of analysis earlier in the year for a telecoms company where they needed to understand. So in telecoms, the coverage from a mast is determined by line of sight. So what can see and be seen from that mast, and this particular customer managed thousands of masts, and they needed to understand which, in that case, which national schools would have coverage from their masts. So it's not a simple problem. You need to understand the topography of the ground, and to be able to perform that analysis and give them those answers was actually quite a straightforward thing in the end, but it was something that they struggled with for quite a long time. Being able to enrich data. So within ArcGIS, you have access to the Michael Bauer data sets which give you information about population, about the demographics of that population, their earning power, their education, and being able to bring that data into your own data is quite a powerful thing. Analyzing patterns. Again, I'm working a lot with telecoms at the moment, and finding point clusters is actually a great tool for being able to identify where you may need to place a new telecoms mast. So if you have a point data set showing where all your where calls have failed, you can perform a piece of analysis that is able to cut through the data, filter out the noise, and identify if there are specific clusters which might indicate a place where a new tower might be appropriate to be built. So proximity, so these are tools that I'd use a lot, especially the create drive times service. And it's probably named slightly poorly there because you can also create drive and walk times based on time and distance. So how far, so create an area indicating how far from a certain point you can walk within 10 minutes. So that's really useful piece of analysis if you're looking at transport hubs. So 10 minutes tends to be a kind of a key metric to how far people will actually walk to any particular transport hub. So to be able to then create that service area and chain it into other pieces of analysis where you can actually appreciate, okay, so this is the service area that this particular transport hub can service, and how many people live within that hub, what is their education, what is their employment status, and that kind of information is equally important if you're looking at say a shopping center. You want to understand how many people live within 10 minutes walk of here, how many people live within 10-15 minutes drive time of here. If you're doing deliveries, are people eligible for those deliveries? So creating those service areas is a really quick way of allowing you to answer eligibility questions. And then simply being able to extract data, being able to cookie cut chunks of data and extract it into various file formats. So as I know, these are services, so they're RESTful services that accept JSON requests and return JSON responses. And I guess the key thing here when I'm talking to developers is that these services can be used within any technology stack that you're comfortable with. So you don't need to be using our APIs and SDKs. You don't need to be using the tools which are available to you within ArcGIS Online. You can bring these services straight into your pre-existing workflows and pre-existing solutions. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a look at a tutorial. So within developers for ArcGIS, you'll find a series of tutorials which walk you through common workflows, and the tutorials are typically available in multiple languages. So I'm going to have a look at a tutorial here which is going to create a service area, and I'm going to explicitly only interact with the REST API. So to do that, I'm going to use Postman. So this is going to open up a Postman collection for me. So you can see from this Postman collection that it has the actual service that I'm going to interact with, and it has pre-populated all of the parameters appropriate to this service request. So in this case, it's going to try and generate service areas based upon 5, 10, and 15 um, kilometer areas. So what I also need is a token in order to be able to run this. So I'm going to go back to my ArcGIS for Developers account. And I'm going to get a temporary access token, which is available to me. And then I'm going to send that request. So this is then come back to me as a JSON response. So, not terribly pretty, but again, I think this indicates that if you're a developer who's used to interacting with RESTful services, these services can be consumed fairly easily. They are secure, they are premium services, so you will need to generate your own tokens in order to interact with them. But that's a fairly straightforward activity. So another way to interact with these services is through ArcGIS Online. And I generally find this a really good way to explore a data set. So, so in the specific example where I mentioned earlier, where I was looking at telecoms towers, originally we were given a series of data sets, and I didn't necessarily know if these data sets were going to be suitable for the piece of analysis that the customer wanted us to do. So I initially went into ArcGIS Online. I had a look at the services. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into ArcGIS Online. I'll go in via the developers dashboard, and I'll create a new map from this point. And I'm going to add in an address data set. That address data set is rendered there. Now, what I actually want to do is I want to anonymize this data. So, this the location is personally identifiable. The actual individual location and the attributes associated with that aren't important to the piece of analysis that I want to do here. So I want to pull that out into a series of hexagons, which will allow me to visualize or present that data in a way which has anonymized the information. So I'm just going to allow that to run for a number of seconds. Whilst I do let that run, again, just to note that this is, from what I'm doing here, it might actually, it depends upon your workflow. You might find this to be, it may not specifically fit within your workflow, but it might be a pre-processing activity that you can do, which then enables you to simplify the solution that you have to hand. So if you can pre-process certain data sets and then bring those pre-processed data sets into your solution, you can then simplify the user experience within your application. You can simplify how your application interacts with those services. So you can see here, so far removed the actual addresses from the map. We have a series of hexagons created with, in effect, hotspots, identifying areas which have a lot of addresses. So I'm going to do another piece of analysis now. Add in So I'm going to add in a point representing Letterkenny Shopping Centre. And what I'm going to do on this is create a do a drive time analysis. So I'm going to look at how far a truck can go. And actually, what I'm interested in is, yeah, so I'm going to do that piece of analysis. Actually, what I meant to do was time. Right? So I meant to do on the basis of time there rather than distance, but that's fine. We'll see how long this piece of analysis takes. So what I'm trying to do here is actually create a service area, show an area of eligibility. Now, what I'm actually really interested in, so whilst this is going to show me a specific area, what I'm really interested in is how many people live within that area. So that analysis has completed. So that's showing me quite a big area. But what I don't really understand is how many people are within those areas. So if I'm going to make a differentiation in terms of delivering, so if I'm going to only deliver to people within 10 miles of my depot versus 20 miles of my depot, I want to understand how many people, what difference that's going to make to the amount of people who are going to be eligible for that delivery. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to enrich that data set. So in effect, I'm going to chain one piece of analysis to another piece of analysis. I'm going to pick some variables. So I have a number of key metrics here that I could bring in. What I'm only interested in at this point in time is population. And I just want the total population rather than any differentiation between males and females. And I'm just going to run that piece of analysis. And hopefully with this, I'll be able to differentiate between these two service areas, and whether extending my service delivery to 20 kilometers is going to be worthwhile to me. So we just get rid of the service area and just show the enriched area. So from this, I can see that the population within the 10 kilometer zone is 28,000. The population within the expanded zone is another 24,000. So it would make a significant difference to me in terms of my potential customer base to expand my deliveries from 10 to 20 kilometers. So another tool that you can use are ArcGIS notebooks. So this is a browser-based interface whereby you can type code and see your results inline. So if you're familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, this is very similar to that. It provides a spatially optimized Jupyter Notebook experience. So I guess we identified that ArcGIS Notebooks sits at the intersection of open data science, enables you to use the ArcGIS Python APIs, and a very large number of open source Python packages. And just have a look at those packages. So if you're familiar with any of these open source packages, some of them may jump out to you. So there's TensorFlow, PyTorch. So a lot of the machine deep learning packages are available within ArcGIS notebooks. So you can do complete machine learning, image classification, pixel classification processes all within ArcGIS notebooks. So you can then bring so I'm not gonna go into that. Like that's a huge topic. I'm not going to go into it today. But what I am going to do is go back to ArcGIS Online, and I will try and create a notebook, which does the same analysis that I did previously through the ArcGIS UI. So when I create my notebook, I have an option to use standard, advanced, or a notebook with GPU support. So again, if you're doing some kind of deep learning algorithm or piece of analysis, then you may want to use the GPU support that is available to you. So each one of these notebooks, in effect, creates its own container. So I'm just going to open that. It'll take a little while to render. So if you are, again, if you're familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, this interface should look very familiar to you. It allows you to create cells and run those cells independently. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, again, because this is now completely integrated with ArcGIS Online and your developer account, you can look at all of the data sets that are available to you within your own account. And beyond that, you can actually search for data sets within other accounts. So there are data sets within the Living Atlas. There are data sets which authoritative data sources may have made available. So various public bodies would generally make authoritative data sources available to you, which can be discovered through this interface. But what I'm going to look for is the address data set that I used earlier. I'm going to bring that into my notebook. I'm also going to bring in another data set, being the actual hexagon bins that I created previously. I'm going to give them a different name. So before I start, I'd better run the top cell. So this is going to give me a warning because I'm an admin on this account, but that's okay. It's basically going to connect to my the actual notebook to my account. And then I'm going to run these individual cells just to indicate that the data is there and it understands the data. And I'm going to now perform a piece of analysis. So in this case, I'm going to use the aggregate points because it's a little bit simpler for me to actually type the code. So I know I need a number of parameters from here. So I need my address data set, which is going to be my initial input. I need that bins data set. So in this case, I need to understand the type of bin, which is going to be a hexagon. The size of the bin. I'm going to make 5 kilometers to make this run as quick as possible. And the actual units of that. And then I'm going to create an output service. Let me just have a review of that. Everything looks okay, so I'll just run that. Everything does not look okay. Bin size unit, it's kilometer. There we go. Live demo. So that's going to take a few seconds to complete. But what I hope you can see from this is that I'm actually doing a very complex piece of analysis. I'm aggregating a series of addresses into a series of polygons. I'm making a determination around what type polygon. I'm going to create then an output layer from that, and I'm making a determination around the size, the shape, and the units that I'm going to create. And what has happened here is, so it has completed successfully, and I'm just going to have a look at that service. And what I specifically care about is taking the actual ID. The reason I care about that, I'm going to leave that. So I just want to close the circle on this by actually adding that to a map. So so let's go map. So I'm going to add a map to my script or to my workbook. I'm going to get the content item that I've just created, and I'm going to add that to my map. And hopefully I have no syntax errors in there. I'll let that to run. And what that is going to do is create a map within my worksheet. And hopefully it has found that the output of that piece of analysis. Just jiggle that around a bit. And it has added it to the map. From that, I can see it has summarized the address points that were underlying those particular areas, and has anonymized out the actual information, leaving me with just a visual representation of the amount of addresses that were underneath that. So that's ArcGIS Notebooks. I can then save that as a piece of analysis. What it also gives me is I have access to a series of live samples, a series of other notebooks that I can look at, which are actually quite complicated. They do a lot of very complex analysis. So I can take them as a starting point if I like. But that is then a really nice way to be able to do a piece of analysis, save that output, rerun that output, share it with other people. So all of the services that I showed at the outset, you can interact with them through that ArcGIS Notebook interface. And in fact, what you're seeing there is simply the interface. What I'm actually doing, I'm interacting with them using the ArcGIS API for Python. So if needs be, you can use, if Python is your development language of choice, you can interact with those services through that Python API. And again, for each one of these use cases, you can see that the actual, what is a very complicated requirement is being implemented with just 1, 2, or 3 lines of code. So being able to perform routing analysis, just a single line of code to be able to interact with that service, managing data to be able to extract and apply overlays to your data sets. Analyzing patterns, finding patterns within your data set, and just 1 or 2 lines of code being able to run that piece of analysis. And coming back to my favorite, which is the creating a service area. Again, being able to create a series of service areas and bring them into whatever workflows that you have to have. So that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this set of webinars, this webinar and this set of webinars. What will happen after this is you will receive an email with a recording to this webinar. If you have any feedback, if you have any questions, by all means, reply to that email. Or indeed, you can email me directly if you have any queries. I'm more than happy to answer them, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I am relatively active on that. But that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed these sessions as much as I did. Thank you very much. Bye.